Please be seated. The court is now in session. Today, the chamber will continue to hear the testimony of the witness Sao Hien. And Ms. Sakalwuti, could you report the attendance of the parties and individuals to today's proceedings? Sakalwuti, Mr. President, for today's proceedings, all parties to this case are present. As for Noon Chi, he is present in the holding cell downstairs. As he requests to be present in the courtroom, his waiver has been delivered to the greffier. The witness who is to testify today, that is Mr. Sao Hien, is present in the courtroom, and the reserved witness is through TCW 944 confirms that through his best knowledge he has no relationship by blood or by law to any of the two accused, Noon Chi or Kieu Sampon, nor to any of the civil parties admitted in this case. This witness will take an oath before the Iron Statute at 10 o'clock this morning before his testimony. He has a duty, he has an assisting counsel, Dutch Parry, with him. President, thank you, Ms. Sakalwuti. The Chamber now decides on the request by Noon Chi. The Chamber has received a waiver from Noon Chi dated 18th February 2015. He confirms that due to his poor health conditions, that is back pain, and that he cannot sit for long. And in order to effectively participate in the future hearings, he requests to waive his right to participate in and be present at the 18th February 2015 hearing. He has been informed by his counsel about the consequence of this waiver, that in no way it can be construed as a waiver of his rights to be tried fairly or to challenge evidence presented or admitted to this court at any time during this trial. Having seen the medical report by the duty doctor for the accused at the ECCC dated 18th February 2015, the doctor notes that the health condition of Noon Chi is that he has a backache when he sits for long, and recommends that the chamber shall grant him his request so that he can follow the proceedings remotely from a holding cell downstairs. Based on the above information and pursuant to Rule 81.5 of the ECCC internal rules, the Chamber grants Noon Chi's request to follow the proceedings remotely from a holding cell downstairs via an audio-visual means, and that applies for today's proceedings. And as Noon Chi waives his direct presence in the courtroom, every unit you instructed to link the proceedings to the room downstairs so that Noon Chi can follow it. The Chamber now gives the floor to the co-prosecutors to put the questions to this witness. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honors, and everyone in and around the courtroom. And good morning to you also, Mr. Sao Hien. At the end of the session yesterday, we were discussing your brother's arrest. Can you tell us how long after the fall of Phnom Penh your brother arrived in your village?
It was a few days after the fall of Phnom Penh he arrived. Then the village chief and his group came to invite him for re-education.
So, how long was it after he arrived in your village that he was arrested?
I didn't know when he was arrested. I think 3 days after he was taken away for re-education. That's what was told to his wife and his family.
And can you tell us how you learned about his arrest? Did you learn from his wife and his family, or did you witness it personally?
When the village chief and the group chief came to arrest him, my family members were there, including my mother and the wife and the family of my brother.
And you mentioned yesterday that he was arrested by a militiaman. From whom did you learn that he had been arrested by that militiaman?
I learned of that information via my sister-in-law.
In answer 46 of your interview, you say the following, quote, "I knew that there was a killing site at Kreng Taichan. My older brother, Bun Hom, was arrested and taken to Kreng Taichan." End quote. Can you tell us how you know your brother was taken to Kreng Taichan?
He was taken away in a horse cart. They did not tie him up. And only later on, I learned from the neighbors that he was taken and killed at Kreng Taichan.
And when did you learn that?
It was during the daytime. I cannot recall the date that I heard of that information, as we didn't know which day of the week it was. Our main focus was to work in the rice field.
In answer 35 of your OCIJ interview, you described your brother as a Lon Nol soldier. Can you tell us what rank he had and where he had served?
He was a former Lon Nol soldier, and I did not meet him then until the time that he was arrested and taken away, and I personally did not know which rank he held.
I'd like to ask you about 3 other people from your area. Their names are Nguyen Chen, Pet Chan, and Uk Narun. Did you know any of these people? And if so, can you tell us what happened to them during the Khmer Rouge period?
I am not familiar with the 3 names that you just mentioned.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask you about another arrest now. In answer 41 of your OCIJ interview, you said the following, quote, "One night I saw them call a person away with them, but I do not remember the name. That person was sent to carry leaves on shoulder poles, but never reappeared. The militia chairman used his subordinates in the militia to call that person away. Siem was the militia chairman. Whether he is dead or alive is unknown. Many others disappeared besides that one, but I do not remember their names." End quote. Can you tell us more about the militia chairman Siem, who he was, and what his involvement was in arrests?
Siem was the militia chairman in Tramkok district. He usually deployed his subordinates in the militia to go and get any person that he needed.
Mr. President, with the Chamber's leave, I would now like to show the witness document E3/2437, ERN 00366707 in English, 00271003 in Khmer, and 00623848 in French. This is a document signed by a person named Siem, dated 29 April 1977 at Tramkok, and addressed to the Chief of Education, Office of District 105.
President and Council, you may proceed.
Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie.
Good morning, Mr. President. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Prior to showing the witness the document, I would like the co-prosecutor to explain to us how this document is related to the witness. I understand that there's a name on the document, but can he please explain to us why it would be useful or worthwhile to show the document to the witness when he has already stated that he had no prior knowledge of the subject matter?
President and the international co-prosecutor, could you enlighten the Chamber on the relevancy of that document to this witness testimony?
Yes, Your Honor. First of all, this is a document that is signed by the person that we believe the witness has just spoken about, that is the militia chairman, Siem. It relates to another arrest. The witness in his OCIJ statement said, "Many others disappeared besides that one, but I do not remember their names." In this context, this is a document that the witness clearly may be able to help us contextualize if he's allowed to look at it.
President, yes, in that case, you can proceed.
And could I also ask that the document be broadcast, please? Mr. Sauhian, I'll give you a moment to look at this document. As I mentioned, it's signed by a person named Siem. It's dated 29 April 1977 at Tramkok. And I'm just going to read a short portion of the document. It says, quote, "Comrade Chief of Education Office of District 105, for your information as the following. I would like to send Amrut Mart and report about his activities to Comrade as follows." End quote. The document then goes on to say that he was a soldier with the rank of sergeant and describes him criticizing Angkar. Now, my question is, did you know this person, Amrit Mat, and do you know anything about his arrest?
I do not know this person.
Okay, thank you for that. I'd now like to turn to the topic of cooperatives. In answer 24 of your OCIJ interview, you were asked whether you remember when private property rights were eliminated. And this is what you said. Quote, after Phnom Penh fell in 1975, all property, such as livestock, paddy fields, and houses, were placed under collective ownership. The people reacted to property being placed under collective ownership, but they did not dare say anything for fear that they would be taken away and killed, end quote. Can you tell us a little bit more about this process of property being placed under collective ownership? How did it happen, and who caused it to happen?
That happened in 1976. The village chief convened a meeting, and all the villagers had to attend that meeting. He announced that all private properties had to be gathered and placed under collective ownership, including cattle, cooking utilities, etc. So from that day onward, the private ownership was abolished.
And can you tell us the name of that village chief, if you remember it?
The first village chief was Tum, and the second person in the village was Acha Nieng, and the third person within the village committee was Ta Ait. However, they all died.
You said that people reacted to property being placed under collective ownership, but that they did not dare say anything for fear they would be taken away and killed. Can you tell us who the people feared would take them away and kill them?
The people fear the most. What the people fear the most was the village chief and his militia.
Answer 25 of your OCIJ interview indicates that after 17 April 1975, you were assigned to work in the rice fields. Who was it that assigned you to work there?
When I was assigned to work in the rice fields, it was assigned by the unit chiefs. The unit chief would assign us to work in designated locations or areas.
And do you recall the name of that unit chief?
It was Tamom. He was in charge of a unit.
In answer 27 of your OCIJ interview, you said, quote, they had us put up checkerboard straight paddy dikes, either single or twin, and we dug both large and small feeder canals, end quote. Can you tell us what specific work you were required to do? Were you digging? Were you carrying dirt, lifting things? What were your actual physical tasks?
I was assigned to build dikes or to plow the rice fields or to plant vegetables or to engage in dry season farming. I engage in all sorts of work in the field.
What hours were you required to work?
For agricultural work, it started from 4 o'clock in the morning and it concluded about 12 or 1 o'clock by noon. Usually, when it was time to conclude the work, a bell was rang, and that's when we knew that it was the noon time that we had to conclude the assigned quota.
And what would you then do in the afternoon?
During the transplanting season, I tended the cows and make sure that they were fed properly. And at night time, after we had our meal, then we had to pull the rice seedlings.
So what time would your work conclude for the day?
Usually, a day's work ended around 7 or 8 p.m.
Were there ever occasions when you were required to work past 7 or 8 p.m.?
No.
During the time you were working in the rice fields, were you free to leave your work unit if you wished to?
No, absolutely not.
And why not? What would have happened to you, or what did you believe would have happened to you?
Since the time that I lived under the 3 years, 8 months, 20 days period, I never asked for a permission to go anywhere. I usually would just finish the work that I was assigned to do.
And why didn't you ever ask for permission to go anywhere?
Because I was really very afraid of the unit chief. I never dared to speak to him, and usually I tried my best to complete the work quotas as soon as possible. And usually it was the unit chief who spoke to me when he assigned me to work at a specific location.
And why were you afraid of your unit chief?
I was very, very afraid of him because I saw people taken away. So for one full day work, usually I never spoke a word to my unit chief, and I spoke only a very few words to people who were working with me or close to me.
And when you saw people taken away, did you know why they had been taken away?
I did not know the reason for them being taken away. They were taken away and simply disappeared.
I think you mentioned a little bit earlier something about quotas. Were workers in your unit punished if they failed to reach their quotas?
President, Mr. Witness, please wait, and Council Kong Sam-on, you have the floor. Kong Sam-on, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to object to this question raised by the co-prosecutor. He made an unclear question, and it was a kind of hypothetical question, and that what would happen, would there be a punishment if the production was not reached? So it was a hypothetical kind of a question, and I object to it.
Your Honor, I don't feel that that was a hypothetical question. I'm asking him about concrete cases in which workers failed to reach their quotas and what then happened.
President, the objection is overruled, and Mr. Witness, please respond to the last question posed to you by the International Co-Prosecutor, if you can recall it.
Perhaps I should repeat my question, Mr. President. Sir, can you tell us what happened to workers in your unit who failed to reach their quotas?
Answer. The quota assigned by UNCA to produce farming, for example, 1 hectare of land to produce 3 tons of rice per hectare. And during the harvesting season, I don't know whether they measure or they do the weighing of the produce. So there was no punishment happen in my unit.
You just mentioned the number of 3 tons per hectare, and in answer 30 of your OCIJ interview, you say you attended meetings where you were told to strive to get 3 to 4 tons per hectare. As a lifelong rice farmer, did you feel that that was a reasonable or realistic production goal based on conditions in your area?
The President, please wait, Mr. Witness. Mr. Kope, you may proceed.
Mr. President, good morning. This is a question that goes far beyond the capabilities of this witness. There is, I can guarantee you, tons of literature about what is reasonable, what can you expect of how many tons per hectare. Depends on all kinds of biological circumstances. Right now we're having 16 tons per hectare, if I understand correctly. So there's much more to it than just asking a farmer as to what the realistic goals are of 3 tons per hectare. So it's an expert question, not a question for this witness.
the President, Judge Fens, you may take the floor to respond to the objection by the defense counsels to the last question put by the co-prosecutor. You may proceed.
For the reasons mentioned by the defense, obviously the chamber wouldn't base any factual findings exclusively on the answer, whatever it will be, of this witness. But that doesn't mean that the witness is not in a position to answer the question, and the chamber wants to hear the answer.
So I'll just repeat the question for you. Mr. Sauhin, as someone who had been farming rice in the period before 1975, did you think that the goal of 3 to 4 tons per hectare was an achievable goal, was a possible goal?
Answer: as far as I know, I am a farmer. We could not produce that 3 or 4 hectare 3-4 ton per hectare. We could not achieve that.
I'd now like to ask you a few questions about the food you received while you were working in the cooperatives. And can you tell us first, where did you go for your meals?
When I need the meals, we would be told to go to the kitchen, and we get a plate of rice and a large bowl of soup for 10 people around the table.
And how many other people ate their meals in this place where you ate?
Every day, all the base people and 17 approved people would go to the communal kitchen for meals.
At answer 33 of your OCIJ interview, you said, quote, "The rations were gruel and sometimes a little rice, but it did not satisfy our hunger. There was a large bowl of soup that we shared, eating 10 persons per table," end quote. Can you tell us what effect these rations had on the health of the workers at the cooperatives?
He's, again, not an expert. He can say something about what happened to him when he didn't have enough soup, but he cannot possibly say anything on the health effects of his fellow cooperative members.
I'm happy to rephrase to limit it to the witness and people he had personal contact with. Mr. Sauhin, can you tell us what effect these rations had on your own health and the health of anyone that you had direct contact with?
We did not receive enough food and meals, and then our health became weak. Some get swollen body, and they go to the hospital, and some disappear. I don't know what happened to them. Sometimes a nurse came to distribute medicine at the unit and also in a group. The medicine was produced locally in the area.
Did people ever complain to the cooperative chief or to any other leader when they felt there was not enough food?
Absolutely not. No one there complained anything. We just complain by ourselves among 1 or 2 people. And if it is overheard by the Khmer Rouge, the person will be disappeared.
In answer 42 of your OCIJ interview, you said, quote, even people who had conflicts about not getting enough food or who had broken a spoon or a plow were considered to be enemies, end quote. Do you know why these people who had conflicts about not having enough food were considered to be enemies?
In practice, the unit chief, they keep saying like that. They keep threatening people in these terms.
Mr. President, with the Chamber's leave, I would now like to show the witness document E3/4127. The ERN in Khmer is 00270806. In English, it's 00362229. And in French, it's 00632505. And this is a document from Tram Kok District dated 17 January 1978. And it's about someone who was arrested for complaining about rice rations.
The President, Counsel, you may proceed.
Mr. President, here again, I would like the co-prosecutor to tell us what the link is between this document and this witness. I understand that he wants to speak about a similar event, but as was done with the previous document, it was not necessary to show the document to the witness to put the question to him. So if he needs to put a question regarding one person in particular, he should first ask the witness if he knows this particular person and then possibly give him the document. So he does not need to see the document to answer this question, if these are questions that are similar to the questions that were put to him previously. So I object to this process because it's something that is recurrent, where without there being a link between a witness and a document is systematically read out to a witness, and I don't think it's useful, and I don't think it is a good way of proceeding with regard to the ascertainment of the truth.
Your Honor, in my submission, there's certainly been adequate foundation laid for the use of this document. The witness has just said that people overheard complaining about food would disappear. This is a document from his area. It's from Tram Kok. The document contains a degree of detail in addition to the name of a person. These are details that we submit could very reasonably be expected to jog the memory of the witness. Of course, at the distance of time that we're dealing with, merely reciting a name may not be as helpful to a witness who could potentially help the chamber to contextualize a document.
Mr. President, if you allow me to react, if you have a closer look at the Krang Tachan documents, as I call them commonly, if they are authentic, you will be able to read that nobody was actually arrested only because he was complaining about food. Sometimes it was mentioned that somebody was complaining about food, but there's always a larger context. There's always accusations of working closely with Vietnamese or other issues like structurally stealing from the community. So just taking out this one passage from a document that this witness doesn't even know doesn't make any sense. Something wrong? Or?
The President, please finish your exchange of objection and response. Defense Counsel, do you have anything to address the court? Please do so. Yes.
Oui, Monsieur.
Yes, Mr. President. Given the reply provided to us by the co-prosecutor, I have even further reasons to object because he's explaining to us that he did not have the intention of providing the name of the person which he wants the witness to react to, and he was intending to refresh his memory. But you cannot refresh a witness's memory if we do not know at the start if it was his intention to speak about this person. So in this case, he's providing him with information that he did not have before. I'm speaking maybe a bit fast, so maybe I will speak a little bit slower for the interpretations. Let me repeat. That is to say that, first of all, and this has always been practiced here before the chamber, if we wish to refresh the memory of a witness, we have to know, first of all, if it was his intent or if he knew the person who is concerned by the events. Here, the witness can only simply speak, generally speaking, about people who are arrested, but we do not have the proof that the witness knew this person who is the object of the document that the prosecutor wants to submit to him, and therefore it's not possible to use this document to refresh the witness's memory if we do not know if the person who is mentioned in this document is someone the witness knew. So therefore, as of the start, there is at least one step that has been cast aside and which we shouldn't.
The President, co-prosecutor, do you have anything to respond to this remark?
Well, certainly I am intending to provide the name of the person. The name of the person is in the document. But there are also additional details about the incident that will present a fuller picture that I think will be more useful in allowing the witness to say accurately whether he remembers this or not. This is a question more about an incident than it is about a particular person.
The President, Judge Lewain, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Chamber wishes to say that when a document is relevant to examine a witness on a topic he is familiar with, the document may be used. This practice also has another benefit, is that when an international counsel or the international co-prosecutor puts questions, there might be problems with the pronunciation of Khmer names. So the fact of reading out the language in the document in the original language of the witness may help in avoiding this kind of problem. Also, the Chamber is sometimes concerned by the fact that in certain questions, the reality of a situation might be poorly represented. So by providing the original document to the witness, we avoid this kind of this risk of confusion. So the Chamber therefore authorizes the use of the document in question.
And could I ask that the document be broadcast as well, please?
The President, your request is granted.
Mr. Salhian, as you can see, this document is addressed to Comrade Brother Committee of the Education Office in District 105. It's dated 17 January 1978, and it's signed by a person named Nun. My first question is, do you remember a Khmer Rouge leader or cadre named Nun in Tram Kok?
I'm not clear on this name. I don't know this name.
Okay. I'd now like to read a little bit of the document to you. It says, we have arrested a new resident named Sok Sai in Tram Kok Village, Tram Kok Subdistrict. This person argued that on 14 January, he was instructed to work like an animal and that the store was full of rice while the food ration was very little, end quote. It then goes on to talk about him complaining about planting cassavas in this month and saying, why do we need to follow those enemies who know nothing about it? And then it continues, quote, therefore, the district committee decided to instruct us to arrest and send him to your place, end quote. And what I want to ask you is, are you familiar with this incident when this person named Sok Sai was arrested for these complaints?
Answer, I refrain to answer this question because I don't know Sok Sai and who he was. I don't know him.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell us, when cooperatives were established in Tram Kok district, were people free to farm and grow what they wanted? For example, could you have grown your own vegetables or fruit to eat when you were hungry?
Answer, people could grow vegetable, but the people from the economic section would collect the crops. People were not allowed to collect them for food.
In answer 36 of your OCIJ statement, you said that many people were sick with things like fever and diarrhea. Was there adequate medical care for these people?
Answer, no.
Can you tell us what happened to people who had fevers and diarrhea in your experience?
Mr. President, is the witness a doctor now or a medical person? Adequate medical care, how would he know?
The President's the objection by the defense counsel does not sustain. Witness, please answer to the last question put by the co-prosecutor if you still remember the question. Anyone who get diarrhea, there was no medicine for them at the group or at the unit. A round rabbit pellet-like medicine was given to those people who fall sick, but the medicine was not efficient for treatment. I didn't see any modern medicine for any treatment.
I'd now like to ask you a few questions about the topic of internal enemies. In your interview at answer 42, you were asked this question, quote, during meetings, did they talk about sweeping clean internal enemies, unquote. Your answer was, quote, they did. Even people who had conflicts about not getting enough food or who had broken a spoon or a plow were considered to be enemies. I never saw them arrest anyone during meetings, unquote. I asked you earlier about people who had conflicts about not getting enough food. Can you tell us why people who had broken a plow or spoon were considered to be internal enemies?
In each meeting that we attended, the unit chief reiterates the same points to all the attendants.
And can you tell us what he told you as best you can remember?
I can recall that if a plow or spoon was broken, then the person who did it would be considered as an internal enemy within the cooperative. And that's the language that was used by the unit chief.
You've mentioned people who complained about food or who broke plows being considered internal enemies. Do you remember any other groups being identified as internal enemies at these meetings?
From what I recall, during the meetings, they reiterated the points that I just said. It means if you broke a spoon or a plow, or if you were to steal something, you will be considered an internal enemy.
You've mentioned the unit chief speaking at the meetings. Do you recall anyone else speaking at the meetings?
We did not dare to raise any issues or to protest. And it was the unit chief who spoke during the meeting.
You also said that you never saw anyone arrested in these meetings at which internal enemies were discussed. Do you know of any situation of a person being arrested for having a conflict about food or for having broken a spoon or a plow?
No, I did not. Of course, they would have other reasons for the arrest of other people, but personally, I did not witness that arrest.
I'd now like to ask you a few questions about the status of Buddhism and Buddhist practice during the period of 1975 to 1979. And could you start by telling the court, as best you remember, what happened to Buddhist pagodas and Buddhist statues in your area during the period from 1975 to 1979?
What I saw in regard to the Buddhist statues, I didn't see them in the pagoda anymore, as they were all taken away. So they were the books or the Buddhist books or disciplines, and some of the Buddhist books were used to wrap tobacco as a smoke.
In answer 45 of your OCIJ statement, you said that pagodas were used as hospitals and workshops. Can you tell us about any specific examples you remember of particular pagodas being used as hospitals or workshops?
There was one Ayodham pagoda in Tramkok commune. It was turned into a workshop. And here I refer specifically to the monks' dining hall in that pagoda. And also in Tmokai pagodas, it was turned into a place where they worked.
Do you know what happened to Buddhist monks in your area during that period?
Buddhist monks in my area, to my knowledge, I did not know what actually happened to them, but I knew that they were defrocked. All of them were defrocked.
And how did you know that?
I saw monks being walked to be defrocked. They walked them along the road towards the northern direction.
Were you familiar with a pagoda called Wat Angroka or Wat Champa? And if so, can you tell us what they were used for in that period?
I know Angroka pagoda. I also know Champa pagoda, but I did not know what they were used for during the regime.
Do you remember ever being told anything about whether you were allowed to practice Buddhism during that period? And if so, what were you told?
During the regime, they did not say anything at all about the religion, because all kinds of religions were prohibited, and we were not allowed to practice any religion, and we were told also not to believe in any superstition.
And who was it who told you not to believe in any superstition?
At each meeting, the group chief or the unit chief repeated the same message, that we should not believe in superstition, and that we should not pray through the statue, the spirit statues.
I now have a few questions for you about weddings during the period of 1975 to 1979. And at answer 43 of your OCIJ statement, you mention weddings of 10 to 20 couples at a time, and you say, quote, "They had them make resolutions," end quote. Can you tell us what a resolution was, in your understanding, and how and why they were made?
Based on the information I received when I asked those people who made resolutions, it means that those people were asked whether they would accept his or her partner to be for life. And if they said yes, it means they made the resolution. And as for the parents or the relatives of those couples, they were not allowed to attend such a ceremony.
You just said these people were asked whether they would accept someone as a partner. Who was it that was asking them whether they would accept someone as a partner?
I did not know whether any of them refused, but I knew about them making resolutions, because at that time the people who attended the ceremony, including the commune chief, the village chief, and the unit chiefs.
You also said that parents and other relatives weren't permitted to attend these ceremonies. Did anyone ever explain to you why parents and other relatives weren't permitted to attend?
I did not know the details nor understand why they did that.
Can you tell us now whether you recall a unit referred to as a widow's unit in your cooperative?
Yes.
Can you tell us what that unit was?
A widow unit, based on what I saw in my village. It referred to a group of women whose husbands were taken away or whose husbands died. So that the women without the husbands were placed into this widows group. As for women with younger children, they would be put in another group. So regardless of their status, these widow groups would engage in the same kind of work that we engage in the rice field. President, The time is now appropriate for a short break. We will take a break now and return at 10:30. And court officer, please assist the witness during the break and have him return to the courtroom at 10:30. The court is now in recess.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ